Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Ganatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shiva Sarigura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine, Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pacharine, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tari. Hare Krishna, it's March 30th, 2021, and we're having an evening program here. And we're going to read, it's called Srila Prabhupada Siksamrta, Nectarian Instructions from the Letters of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're going to read from a section where Prabhupada is responding to letters, writing letters about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. There are thousands and thousands of letters on subjects from films and movies to art, to magazines, book distribution, business and money, married life, raising children, opening restaurants, Vaishnava etiquette to Lassi Devi, and just dozens and dozens of topics. Health, many letters about health, humility, prasadam. So these are some letters related to some finer points of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Okay. It goes on for many, many pages, but we'll just read a few and get some taste. Okay. All right. So this is a question. This is a letter to Sriman Anil Grover, February 5th, 1970. So Prabhupada writes, now coming to the point of questions, your first question is, what am I? Is the body itself matter or spiritual soul or a combination of both? Answer, you are eternal servant of Krishna. The body is matter. The spirit soul is different from the body. It is not exactly combination, but it is engagement. Just like if you put oil in the water, the oil does not mix up with the water. Similarly, soul does not mix with material body, but due to our material consciousness, we are thinking that the movement of this body is the movement of the soul. Therefore, when the body is destroyed, we think the soul is destroyed. That is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that the soul does not die with the destruction of the body. With the destruction of one's body, the soul transmigrates to another body, thus the bondage of material existence. Therefore, to train the soul properly to revive his original consciousness or Krishna consciousness is the real purpose of human life. Then your second question, if the body is pure soul, then why it gets engaged with worldly matter. As explained above, the body is not the soul. It gets engaged in worldly matter due to its vitiated consciousness. Just like some of us are thinking, I am American or I am Indian. It is due to the vitiated consciousness. The real consciousness is that I am eternal servant of Krishna. Or it is just like a madman who thinks himself that he is a king. He is free to do whatever he likes and talks nonsense, but a sane man laughs at him. Our engagement in the matter is just like a madman's activities. When one is treated by the treatment of Krishna consciousness, he becomes relieved from all these designated engagements. When I feel as American or when I feel as Indian, that is the cause of all sorts of anxieties and frustrations. Krishna consciousness means to come to the pure understanding that one is neither American or Indian, but he is eternal servant of Krishna, and thus engages himself in rendering loving service to the Lord. This is his pure spiritual life. As long as he does not come to that standard, he is supposed to be materially contaminated. The Krishna consciousness movement means to engage our senses in the service of the Lord, just opposed to the materialistic way of life, wherein the senses are engaged for sense gratification. Your third question is, as you have explained in 2 essays, that as the body is covered with shirt and coat, similarly the soul is covered by mind, intelligence, and false ego. If it is so, then who are mind, intelligence, and false ego? Who controls them? The soul controls the mind and intelligence. When he is designated, he controls the mind and intelligence in one way, but when he is free from designation, he controls the mind and intelligence in another way. In other words, when the soul is designated, for example, as an American or Indian, he controls the mind and intelligence in that direction and acts for that particular nation. Similarly, when he is free from the designations and feels himself as the servant of Krishna, he controls his mind and intelligence for that purpose. That is to say, a soul is destined to use his mind and intelligence for rendering service to others, because his original position is servant. A servant has to render service to some master, so when he is in designated condition of life, he accepted somebody as master, which is Maya. Maya is illusion. When a soul renders, therefore, service as an American or Indian or any other designation, he accepts Maya as his master, because thinking oneself as American or Indian is illusion. Therefore, one's perfect position in life is to render service to Krishna, and for that purpose, control the mind and intelligence. So the conclusion is, in either of his statuses of life, the soul itself is the controller of the mind and intelligence. Fourth question, where does spiritual life lead us? How should people recognize whether we would take birth in our next life or not? Answer, spiritual life leads us to our original constitutional position, free from all designations. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita's Brahma-bhuta or Brahma-bhuta status. This Brahma-bhuta status means free from all anxieties without any hankering or lamentations. At that stage only, one can think of universal brotherhood. And the next stage is to be engaged in pure Krishna consciousness and thus gradually be transferred to the spiritual world where there is eternal life full of bliss and knowledge. In other words, the spirit soul, when he is fully liberated from material contamination or designations, he no longer transmigrates to another material body after death. He is transferred to the spiritual world for eternal residence in one of the spiritual planets known as Vaikunthas. The abode of Lord Krishna is the highest Vaikuntha planet, known as Goloka Vrindavan. People must understand intelligently that they are transmigrating from one body to another at every moment. This is a medical fact. The blood corpuscles are changing at every moment and new corpuscles are taking their place. The old order changes, yielding place to the new. In this way, the soul is transmigrating from baby body to child body, from child body to boy body, from boy body to youth body. So at the end, when the material of the body does not act very nicely, the soul has to take another material condition of body, giving up the present one. The body is changing, but the soul is there. Every one of us can remember our childhood body or past body. That past body is no longer existing, but I am existing now, and I existed in the past, and therefore I must exist in the future despite the change of body. These things are nicely explained in the Bhagavad Gita, and we should take advantage of this knowledge. Fifth question. To achieve the goal of Krishna, should we pass our life through matter to spiritual life or direct to spiritual life? The goal of Krishna can be achieved in a second if we simply accept the truth that we are eternal servant of Krishna. Although I am within this material body, I can immediately stop its material function simply by developing my Krishna consciousness, which means to accept that I am eternal servant of Krishna. Unfortunately, all the karmis, gyanis, and yogis are thinking of themselves in different degrees that they are not servants of Krishna. Therefore, it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that after many, many births of different activities, under different concepts of life, when one actually becomes wise, he surrenders unto Krishna, understanding Vasudeva, Lord Krishna, is the cause of all causes. But such great soul, accepting Krishna as the Supreme Master, is very, very rarely to be found. Fortunately, by the grace of Lord Chaitanya, the Krishna consciousness revival is made very easy simply by the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. Therefore, I advise you to chant this sublime Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and be happy in this life without any frustrations, anxieties, worries, etc., as you have mentioned in the first part of your letter. This is practical and very easy to perform. Try it sincerely, and your life will be sublime. Hare Krishna. Okay. It was a long letter to Anil Grover. So, on April 15th, 1970, Srila Prabhupada writes to Shama Sundar, regarding the presence of the soul, it is experienced by everyone as the living force or consciousness which gives the body life. So long the living force remains within the body, the life symptoms are exhibited. When at the last stage of a man's life, the doctor is feeling the pulse and then the beating stops, he says, he is gone now. Who is gone? The complete bodily machinery remains, but the living soul has left it and the machinery stops working. It is the soul that has left. The soul is there and the presence is known by the life symptoms. And when the soul departs, its absence is perceived by the stopping of the exhibition of life symptoms by the body. Just as the machine is working so long the current is introduced into it, and as soon as the electricity is removed, the machine stops functioning. We know that there is electricity in the machine and that it is making the machine run. And we also perceive that the electric force is absent when the machine has stopped running. In this way, the presence of the soul may be perceived directly by any thoughtful person. Next is a letter from Srila Prabhupada to Markandeya Rishi, May 1st, 1974. Recently, I have read one article in the Gazette by Ray Corelli entitled, Heart Surgeon Wants to Know What a Soul Is, and it was very interesting. Your comments show great insight, and so I thought to write you on this matter. Perhaps you may know. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a letter to Dr. Bigelow, January 20th, 1971. The next letter is to Markandeya Rishi. So this is to Dr. Bigelow, January 20th, 1971. So Prabhupada is writing this article. So apparently Bigelow is the heart surgeon who wants to know what is the soul. I think parts of this letter appear in Science of Self-Realization. So Prabhupada writes, your comments show great insight, and so I thought to write you on this matter. Perhaps you may know that I am the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. I've got several temples in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, and Hamilton. This Krishna consciousness movement is specifically meant to give every soul his original spiritual position. Undoubtedly, the soul is present in the heart of the living entity, and it is the source of all the energies for maintaining the body. The energy of the soul is spread all over the body, and this is known as consciousness. On account of this consciousness spreading of energy of the soul all over the body, you can feel pains and pleasures in any part of the body. The soul is individual, and he is transmigrating from one body to another, just as a person transmigrates from babyhood to childhood, from childhood to boyhood, from boyhood to youthhood, and then to advanced old age. Then the change called death takes place when we change to a new body, just as we change our old dress to a new dress. This is called transmigration of the soul. When a soul wants to enjoy this material world, forgetting his real home in the spiritual world, he takes this life of hard struggle for existence. This unnatural life of repeated birth, death, disease, and old age can be stopped when his consciousness is dovetailed with the supreme consciousness of God. That is the basic principle of our Krishna consciousness movement. So far as heart transplant is concerned, there is no question of success unless the soul is there in the heart. So it has to be accepted. Just like in sexual intercourse, if there is no soul, there is no conception, no pregnancy. Contraception means to make the womb deteriorated so that it no longer is a good place for the soul. That is against the order of God. By the order of God, a soul is sent to a particular womb, and by this contraceptive, he is denied that womb and has to be placed in another. That is disobedience of the Supreme. Just as a man who is supposed to live in a particular apartment, if the situation there is so disturbed that he cannot enter the apartment, then he is put at a great disadvantage. That is illegal interference and is punishable. The undertaking of soul research would certainly mark the advancement of science. But advancement of science will not be able to find out the soul. It can simply be accepted on circumstantial understanding. You will find in the Vedic literature that the dimension of the soul is 1/10,000 times smaller than the point. The material scientist cannot measure the length and breadth of a point. Therefore, it is not possible for the material scientist to capture the soul. You can simply accept the soul's existence by taking it from authority. What the greatest scientists are finding, we've explained long ago. As soon as one understands the existence of the soul, he can immediately understand the existence of God. The difference between God and the soul is that God is a very great soul, and the living entity is a very small soul, but qualitatively they are equal. Therefore, God is all-pervading and the living entity is localized. The nature and quality is the same. The next letter is to Markandeya Rishi, May 1st, 1974. Prabhupada writes.
Can I ask a question about the previous letter?
Sure, yeah, Ramachandra, yes.
Thank you. I was wondering if let's say someone asks about this heart surgery transplantation process, if the heart is in the soul, then by changing the heart, the personality is supposed to be changed. I mean, I heard that argument once, but I understand from the context that it's not necessarily like that, and I wonder how come.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Okay, so the soul is in the heart. So my understanding of that, because we hear that so many times, is that it means the spirit soul is situated in the region of the heart. It's situated in the region of the heart. But that doesn't mean that the soul's presence there in the region of the heart is dependent on the physical organ we call heart, arteries, aorta.
Energetic heart?
Energetic heart. Yeah, right. That I like that term, energetic heart, Laura said. Yes. So sure, the soul situated in that energetic heart. Just like, we hear about there's 5 knowledge acquiring senses like eyes, ears, nose. There's 5 working senses, arms, legs, tongue, like that. But then it's also described that the senses are part of the subtle body. So it's sort of like, yeah, that like, okay, these kind of gross eyeballs and the ear, okay, that's the external organ through which the senses work. So the soul is situated in the region of the heart. That doesn't mean necessarily that if the heart is removed, that the soul has to go with it. So, so if the scientists, and apparently back 50 years ago or so, when I think it was the late 60s when they started a heart transplant, they found a way to take the heart out, put another heart in. So that's my understanding. The soul is in the region of the heart, but that doesn't mean that its existence there is dependent on the external physical organ we call heart in medical science.
Thank you. So it's like I like that expression that Laura used, the energetic heart, like the subtle body occupies that specific space, which is not changing because it's the karma, the destiny of the soul to be there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ramachandra. Okay. Next letter. Prabhupada writes to Markandeya Rishi. You have asked, what is the origin of the black race? This is not an important question. Why should you be curious about the temporary body? If I am very interested in knowing about my clothing that I am wearing only temporarily, it is not a very important thing. We have had many bodies which we change like sets of clothes. To be very absorbed in the present body one has, whether it is black or white or yellow, is not the sign of a wise person or Krishna conscious devotee. As to whether the personality of Kali was black, it may not have been so. After all, Krishna is black, although his body is different. He is such Chittananda. So our inquiry should be on the point of Krishna, not in reference to the so-called race or religion or nationality of this temporary, miserable body.
Can I add something about the heart transplant question?
Sure.
In a morning walk conversation, Prabhupada was discussing, he was asked, this was December 2nd, 1973 in Los Angeles. Srila Prabhupada asked Prabhupada, what about the heart transplant? The spirit soul is within the heart, but when the ... in the medical science nowadays, the old heart can be replaced by a new one. So what happens with the spirit soul with the old one? Prabhupada. But that does not mean that new ones will increase their duration of life. That is our challenge. Srila. But the personality is changed? Question mark. No. Srila. Why not? Prabhupada. Why changed? Suppose if I sit from this chair to this chair, why am I changed? I can change my seat. It does not mean that I am changed. Karandar. Change the heart also. The heart can change. Prabhupada. The heart is seat, sitting place. But the new heart had spirit soul from the new one. Prabhupada. Spirit soul, new or old, is there. But if you can prove by changing the heart, you can increase the duration of life, then you can catch the spirit soul. Karanda, that they're not able to do. Prabhupada, that is their nonsense. And it goes on.
Thanks for that. Thanks for pulling that up real quick. For further comments from Prabhupada.
Thank you, Atmananda.
Yeah.
Okay, well, on January 25th, 1969, Prabhupada writes to Mahapurush, regarding your questions, the so-called love which goes on in the material world is simply a perverted form of dasya ras. Everything in this world is a perverted form of ras, just like Yashoda is loving Krishna as her son. So this is Vatsalya ras, parental love. When Krishna is separate from Yashoda, she cried for whole life and thus became blind in this world. there's not a single instance where a mother has suffered so much in separation from her son. Therefore, it is perverted reflection of the real love. Yes.
That was perverted reflection of Dasyaras?
He said Dasiras, yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Dasi means servant Ras.
Reflective. We pretend to serve each other,
Right.
and actually it's perverted because it's just for only our own sense gratification.
Yeah. Okay. So this is October 27th, 1969. This is a letter to Sai. I'm assuming it's the Sai who became Siddhaswarup and Siddhaswarupananda. So this is where he was a yoga guru and he had many followers, and he joined Prabhupada, and many or most of his followers came with him and joined Prabhupada. So Prabhupada writes to Sai in 1969. It has given me much satisfaction, and if you read our Srimad Bhagavatam, you will find there what is the distinction between realization of Brahman, Paramatma, impersonal supersoul, and the personality of Godhead. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, all of these realizations are on the transcendental plane as much as sunshine, the sun globe, and the predominating deity on the sun globe are all full of light and high temperatures. Similarly, either in Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan, personality of Godhead, realization, you will always find spiritual light and heat. But as there are different degrees of sunshine, the sun globe and the sun's deity, similarly, there are also degrees of transcendental bliss in the different features of the Absolute. The summary is that the Absolute Truth is the sum total of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. Impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth is realization of eternity. Localized Paramatma realization is realization of transcendental knowledge. But above all these, as they are described in Bhagavad Gita, there is Purushottama, the Supreme Person. That is Krishna. In the Vedas, it is stated that one who has understood the Supreme Person has understood everything. That is because everything is subordinate to the Supreme Person. So if you kindly try to understand this philosophy of the Supreme Person as described in Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, you will understand our activities more clearly. I'm struck by some of the language there. Yeah. Prabhupada writes in the first sentence, it has given me much satisfaction. And if you read our Srimad Bhagavatam, you will find there what is the distinction between realization of Brahman, Paramatma, and then Prabhupada puts in quotes, impersonal supersoul, and the personality of Godhead. So so like this Paramatma realization of God, of Absolute, it's like an intermediate stage, because we know that the Paramatma is personal. It's four-armed form of Krishna for the yoga. Of course, Krishna can appear as Shyamasundar, two-armed form in the heart. But it sounds like at the beginning stages of super soul realization, it's more personal than Brahman realization, but it's not yet a personal relationship. So Prabhupada calls it impersonal super soul. And my understanding is that as the yogi progresses, then the relation becomes more and more personal, and the yogi comes to Brahman realization.
You know where it is where Prabhupada mentions that the advanced yogi, upon seeing the super soul, makes the mistake of identifying himself with him and thinks, oh, therefore I'm God.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I think there's more than one reference like that, and I don't have it on the top of my head. Where it's something I might have in notes I've taken when reading Prabhupada's books or lectures.
Mm-hmm.
So Prabhupada definitely says that. That's without a doubt, and we can probably find it with some search. But that's the pitfall. That's the pitfall that the yogi starts to think I am the super soul, rather than getting, oh, I'm a servant of God in the heart. I'm not God.
So in that sense, they can continue the impersonal journey, so to speak, and jump into that last snare of Maya.
Yeah, right.
Even in such an advanced state.
Even in such an advanced state, it's a risk on that path.
The Tasta Shakti, the marginal potential is always there.
Yeah. Prabhupada talks a lot about like Patanjali, and that, like in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is what we're studying now in our Bhagavad Gita course. In the purports, Prabhupada talks a lot about Patanjali and the yogas based on Patanjali. And my understanding is Prabhupada, he's appreciating Patanjali. But if we look at the totality of the teachings, like many of the yogis who follow Patanjali, they fall into that kind of trap of thinking they are the super soul and that sort of thing. Yeah. So Prabhupada writes to Bhagavan Das, January 2nd, 1970. In Boston, always 50 to hundreds of devotees chanting, dancing, and engaged in Krishna conscious business. That is the aim of our Krishna consciousness movement. We do not want stopping the natural instincts of the living entities. We simply want them to be dovetailed in Krishna's service. Your country is fortunate enough by the grace of the goddess of fortune. The goddess of fortune, or Lakshmi Devi, is eternally engaged in service of the Lord. Therefore, the favor of goddess of fortune, which is bestowed upon the American people, may be fully engaged in Krishna's service. That will be a finishing touch to this material advancement. If people do not take to Krishna and simply want to utilize the goddess of fortune for sense gratification, as it was the policy of the demons like Ravana and Hiranyakashipu, then the finishing touch will certainly culminate in releasing the nuclear weapon, exactly like Ravana was vanquished by such policy. Hare Krishna. Okay. A short letter, Srila Prabhupada to Guru Hari, May 29th, 1971. Universal form is a person also. And from that universal form, so many things are appearing. When I say a short letter, these are excerpts of the letters that deal with philosophy. Like there might be a very long letter that deals with other questions and approaches. Okay.
That Prabhupada says that universal form is also a person?
All right. Universal form is a person also.
Also.
And from that universal form, so many things are appearing.
Yeah, it brings up a question, because if he is a spiritual person, he's not eternally existing.
Right.
I mean, and maybe it's a little bit like the deity, who is a person but is not eternally existing in that way. I don't know.
Krishna appears personally in that particular form of material energy. Yes. Right. I think it's one of these Achintya Beta Beta Tattva things.
Right. Huh.
Okay. So Prabhupada writes to Ashuttananda and Yashodanandan Maharaj, December 18th, 1975. Naturally, the Sankirtan men traveling with the bullock carts are blissful. It is Lord Chaitanya's engagement. Lord Chaitanya personally traveled all over India for 6 years. His program was simply kirtan and prasad distribution. Lord Chaitanya never spoke philosophy in public. When he met big scholars like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he spoke philosophy. Otherwise, for the mass of people, kirtan and prasad distribution. So continue this program. It is very pleasing to Lord Chaitanya. Yes. Prabhupada writes to Sriman Joshiji, May 9th, 1976. Just now, I am on my 15th world tour, and your letter was forwarded to me here in Hawaii from my Bombay address. It will take at least 3 months to return to India. I am very much pleased that you have invited us to cooperate with you in the matter of humanitarianism. I shall be glad to know in detail what is your program. Our program is to awaken the human society to God consciousness. The living entity is eternal and changing body by the evolutionary process. In this material world, there are 8,400,000 forms of body, and the living entity is passing through the cycle. When the living entity is given a chance in the process to become a human being, he has to decide which way he wants to go. We are preaching on the basis of the Vedic literatures, which are considered to be the most authentic knowledge by Indian scholars, religionists, and people in general. This authenticity is being appreciated now by all scholarly sections throughout the whole world. Our books are being received by all libraries, universities, and scholarly persons. And I wish also that your institution may also order for all these books so that you can understand our point of view. Enclosed is one catalog which vividly describes some of these books. They are available to your institution through our Bombay branch, where address is Hare Krishna Land, Juhu Road, Juhu, Bombay, 400-054. With reference to your statement that you are concerned with this life alone, I could not follow what you mean by this. In this life also, you take care of educating your children. So if the child is not educated for the next stage of life, then how do you account for the child's youthhood age? Life is a continuation. The baby grows to become a child, the child grows to become a boy, the boy grows to become a young man, the young man becomes a middle-aged man, and the middle-aged man becomes an old man. So with which stage of life are you concerned? I shall be glad to know in which stage of life you are interested. If you don't take care of the child and simply become concerned with the young man, is it possible to act properly in the matter of humanitarianism? And according to the transmigration of the soul, a man can become a dog in the next life. So you take care of this life, and if in the next life he becomes a dog, then what? Immediately, of course, we do not insist on philosophy. But if people join Sankirtan, chanting and dancing and taking prasadam, then immediately we can begin cooperating without any distinction of Hindu, Christian, Muslim, etc. Unless we make our program in an authorized, perfect way, anything we try to do will be a failure. So I shall be glad to hear from you further in this matter.
Prabhupada is the most expert preacher. In like the needle and out like the plow. He basically challenges this man and tells him he's a nonsense without saying that. Just taking it step by step, gradually following using that man's own arguments, but going right deeply into what do you mean? I mean, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, he's appreciating his point of view. He's meeting him where he's at. And on that foundation, he's challenging.
Yeah.
He's challenging. Yeah.
Turns the whole thing into spirit.
Yeah.
In the most reasonable way that man can obviously, understand and relate with.
Yes. Yes, very, very expert.
I wanted to bring up one thing that Ramchandra brought up at the end of after your reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita about Lord Chaitanya's dancing. Was it 17th chapter, Madhya Leela, or 13th?
That we read from?
Yep.
I need to look. I'm not sure.
That's right. Either way, and he talked a lot in there is about Prataparudra, King Prataparudra. And Ramachandra asked, why did Lord Chaitanya not accept King Prataparudra, but he accepted Ramananda Roy, who was also not a king, but in a lower status materially. And I was thinking, because the previous letter you just wrote, Prabhupada said, Lord Chaitanya never spoke philosophy in public. So I shared one thought, one possible answer to Ramachandra by chat after you finish on Gaur Purnim evening. But this points another possible reason that in that situation, Maharaj Prataru was in public and servants and so many people around. But when Ramananda Roy discussed with Ramananda Roy, it was all private.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks for that. Yes. So okay, yes, you're talking about on Sunday we read from chapter 13 of Madhya Lila, Lord Chaitanya's ecstatic dancing in front of the Rath Yatra cart. And towards the end of that chapter, towards the end of that pastime, Lord Chaitanya, he's kind of falling, and then he sees King Prataparuja and goes, oh, I can't get close to a king. Right. And so, of course, as Ramachandra points out in this question, Ramachandra Roy was also a very worldly person, pure devotee, but very involved in politics and money and stuff like that. So now related to what you just shared, Atmananda. So if we follow to the next chapter, chapter 14 of Madhya Lila, then Lord Chaitanya co-creates with Maharaj Prataparuja a very intimate setting. And then in a sense, he goes beyond, because there's kirtan prasad for everyone. Okay, then there's philosophy for a select few. And then for the most intimate associates, talks about like the rasas and Vrindavan and Radha Krishna. And he did have those talks with Maharaj Prataparuja. And just as you say, he set up a very one-on-one intimate arrangement for that, not in the middle with thousands of people there.
Right.
Present there on Sunday at Damayanti and Garuda's was Nanda Kishore Prabhu, husband of Mother John. And so Prabhupada writes to Nanda Kishore in December 1967. What's that? He's the husband of Mother Janava. You know Janava?
I heard people talk about it. I don't know that.
You don't know Janava? Okay.
I feel like I've heard a lot of people.
Yeah, Janava, the first advanced course in North Florida was March 2003. She was in that. We took the course, it was around 2017 or something. And we took it with Kalyapani. And so she came to Prabhupada's movement in the late 60s. So Prabhupada writes to Nanda Kishore, you are right when you say that our past life is a dream only. Just like at night, we see so many dreams, and in daytime, we forget everything. Similarly, we forget everything of our past life, and as such, so long we do not respond to our factual spiritual life, all these changes of lives, one after another, are considered to be dreams. Less intelligent persons are very much interested in dreaming life, but one who is intelligent enough, he searches after eternal life. The modern civilization does not understand what is eternal life. They are busy with the spot life of 50 or 100 years. Fools cannot think that one is not for 50 or 100 years, but one is for eternity. And on June 9th, 1967, Prabhupada writes to Mr. Tabor, so far as your distress is concerned, it is not new. It is the general condition of living entities who are distressed for want of sense gratification. Unless one is related with Krishna, the reservoir of all pleasure, it is very difficult to have complete pleasure perception in this material world. You have read Bhagavad Gita, and it is stated that ultimate happiness can be realized by transcendental senses only. Our movement for Krishna consciousness is to turn the present polluted senses into its original pure form, just like when a man cannot see properly due to cataracts in the eyeball. Similarly, we cannot have real sense pleasure without being purified in Krishna consciousness. This purification can be done only by engaging the senses for Krishna. Krishna is called Rishikesh, or the master of the senses. His senses are omnipotent. Therefore, when our senses will be engaged to satisfy the senses of Krishna, at that time we will have perfect sense gratification and be free of all distressed condition. A spirit soul is not impersonal, and because he is a person, he has the latent desire for sense gratification. But in the material condition, he does not know how to enjoy. Therefore, one should purify the senses, being free of all material designation. In conditioned stage, we are designated souls like American, Indian, dog, demigod, etc. But in pure consciousness or Krishna consciousness, we are part and parcel of the Supreme Brahman. By Brahman realization, as you may have read in Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nashochati Nakakshati. So in our pure stage, when we understand that we are eternal servants of Krishna, there is no more distress. Therefore, the devotee prays, my Lord, when shall I be freed from all material desires and be completely engaged in your transcendental loving service? At the present moment, I am forlorn and nobody is my master. When shall I have you as my supreme master? Then I shall joyfully wander over the whole universe, knowing that you are my master. Please therefore try to be in Krishna consciousness, and there will be no distress. Gradually, as you will realize this, you will experience it also, but the process is the same, both at the beginning and at the end. Prabhupada states that in this bhakti yoga, the journey is the goal. Like, well, we do bhakti yoga, and then we do bhakti yoga. The reward for service is more service. I know also twice in this letter, Prabhupada writes that this Mr. Tabor, he has read Bhagavad Gita. You have read Bhagavad Gita, and it is stated that ultimate happiness can be realized by transcendental senses only. So we can note that this is from June 9th, 1967, before Prabhupada published Bhagavad Gita as it is. So someone had read some other version of some other edition.
He mentions the man mentioning stress, about your stress, and Prabhupada said it's some, I don't remember the words, but it's the normal condition in this world. So
Yeah, Prabhupada writes, so far as your distress is concerned, it is not new.
it is not new. Perfect.
It is the general condition of living entities who are distressed for want of sense gratification. It is not new. Yeah.
It is not new. So what seems to be a little new is the way it's coming across these days with the whole pandemic vaccination thing. People are becoming more and more stressed and fearful and just panicking and terrified. So I often, because there's so many counter arguments to this. I saw a video this morning of a few politicians, professors, and doctors talking about breaking up the pharmaceutical monopolies, which are controlling for the sake of profit all these producing the vaccine. So I often have the question, well, we should be aware of how, the demoniac forces. But for me personally, is it better for me to spread really good arguments about the awareness of the control and manipulation that's going on? Or should I just focus on my Krishna consciousness? And I think I know the answer. I see your example, but I think for me, it's a question of faith. Because if I have faith in what Prabhupada has done and in what he's saying, then I will know that in the long term, at least, people will, and people are and will further wake up and take their freedom, develop their own spiritual freedom. So it's been a challenging question for me.
Yeah, well, we're looking at what's our service, what's our service. And so, in devotional consciousness, we don't ignore the corruptions and, sure, some conspiracy theories are nonsense and some are, true or have at least partial truth like that. But the ultimate conspiracy, so what was this? I think it was Prabhupada gave a morning class about a week ago or even 5 days ago. So, and the theme was the ultimate conspiracy is Maya, right? She's the ultimate conspirator, and basically it's a whole conspiracy, and Maya has us duped, thinking that I'm this body. I'm American, I'm Indian, I'm black, I'm white, I'm woman, I'm man. I'm 60, I'm 70, I'm 25. So it's a conspiracy. A conspiracy means convincing masses of people that something is true that's really not true. So even, say, the modern day, let's say there are demoniac forces, conspirators trying to control the food supply and the I forget all the terms, and the airplanes in the sky leaving the chemtrails. Yeah, so it might, like, I'm not ridiculing it. I'm not really, like, a lot of it could be true, but of course it's true that people are in lower modes with very greedy motivations, and okay, but all of them, like Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, all of them are victims of the ultimate conspirator Maya. So that's the ultimate conspiracy. Maybe for some it's our service to expose this truth and this light. It might be our service. But if that is our service within the realm of political lobbying or something, okay. But then let's keep it on the foundation of the ultimate conspirator is Maya, because whatever, even though, the corporate magnates, billionaires, and the media, okay, but all of those people who are CEOs of those companies or whatever, they're all in bodies that'll grow and become diseased and die. Okay, like today or tomorrow or 50 years maximum. Okay, so, and I'm going to be effective in supporting people to wake up to the actual reality and come out of the ultimate conspiracy illusion to the extent that I'm awake, and to the extent that I'm in ignorance about who I am and who I'm not. To the extent that I'm in ignorance, then whatever I do, it'll be of very little benefit, and I might even be doing more harm than good. We gave an example, actually it was during a PPTC, I think it was the PPTC a few days ago. Ramachandra's in that PPTC. I just gave an example that around the turn of the century, 1900, there was a big environmental movement. And the environmentalists of that time, 1900, they were advocating their main stance. They were advocating for the invention, for the development of this new invention called the horseless carriage, the automobile, because there was a big pollution problem, air pollution from the horse droppings in big cities like Philadelphia, Paris, London, New York, like that. And so the environmental groups, they wanted to develop the automobile in order to eliminate air pollution from the earth. It's true. You can look in the journals from that time. And so we can see it, they were successful, but it didn't really work out very well. So just, oftentimes like trying to pierce through the conspiracy. But Prabhupada makes the point that if what we're trying to do is at least in sattva, if it's at least in goodness, some good is there. If it's transcendental, then we're really getting at the root of evil. If it's sattva, some good. And if our attempts to help on an individual, interpersonal, planetary, community. If our attempts to help are Rajas and Tamas, we're doing more harm than good. So these are principles to keep at the forefront. Got some-
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Now, Prabhupada writes to Hayagriva, November 18th, 1968. You should all read very carefully Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, and you should be able to answer all questions like this, and only in rare cases approach me. But it is important that our students must be able to answer all questions for becoming preachers. And yes. So Prabhupada writes to Vegavan Das, December 17th, 1976. Regarding the question you have asked, you can give a very straight answer. Bhagavad Gita says, Dehantara Praptir. The soul transmigrates, but there is no regular process. In the beginning of creation, when all the world was water, all living entities were aquatics. Then gradually from aquatics, the soul passes into plant bodies, then insect bodies, then bird bodies, then animal bodies, then human beings. In the human form, the soul can decide whether to go back to home, back to Godhead, or return to birth and death, accepting material bodies according to his karma. Therefore, it is advised to take advantage of the human form of body to go back home, back to Godhead. Our movement is for this purpose, to offer all human beings a chance to go back home, back to Godhead. Okay, I'll read another. This is Prabhupada writing to Yadu Nandan, March 26, 1968. I am in due receipt of your letter dated March 21st, 1968, and may inform you that the horrible scene in the hospital is certainly ghastly. But we should at the same time know that this ghastly scene is in the matter of the bodily concept of life. This is Maya's illusion, and although the spirit soul has nothing to do with these horrible affairs, due to absorption of one's consciousness in the body, one has to suffer the consequences of bodily identification. So far we are concerned, we shall neither be sympathetic nor apathetic in the matter of such bodily concept of life. Of course, it is quite natural to become sympathetic when one's body is put into such horrible condition. But if you are firmly convinced that this body is separate from the soul, then we may not be distracted. That is not possible, of course, in the preliminary stage, but when we shall be in a transcendental position, not to be disturbed by every such a horrible scene, then our position is secure. The suffering of the man and the sympathy of the other man both are concerned on the body. But this we have to understand by knowledge. Then such horrible condition of body won't be disturbing to us. That is the position of liberation. It doesn't mean we shall not be sympathetic to one who is suffering, but we should always remember that such sufferings are due to the bodily concept of life. As you stated that you simply want to leave the material world and be with Krishna, that is the best solution rather than taking account of how things happened that you came here. Like that, our best occupation is to get out of the scene by constantly chanting Hare Krishna and being engaged in the transcendental service of Lord Krishna.
The problem is saying, get out of the scene.
Get out of the scene, yeah.
What's the context, Tom? Do you know the context?
that letter. I don't know the letter, but it sounds like maybe Yadunandan was in the hospital with some severe things happening to his body. Either that, or he was with a friend or a family member. He was apparently in the hospital seeing some ghastly things happening to the material body. That's my understanding of the context.
And what's the date of that letter?
March 26th, 1968.
Very interesting.
So Prabhupada is saying, okay, there is ghastly thing to that happen to the body, and I guess he was speaking about Yadunandan looking at other people, not necessarily himself, and not be disturbed by what's happening to other people.
Yeah, I mean,
While being compassionate.
it could be. Of course, Prabhupada writes, of course, it is quite natural to become sympathetic when one's body is put into such horrible condition. So maybe it was Yadunan himself who was put into horrible condition. It's not that, we don't have Yadunandan's letter. But Prabhupada said when one's body, so he does talk about sympathy for others, and he also talks about one's own body.
What's the sentence in which he says we should neither be sympathetic nor apathetic?
Okay, Prabhupada writes, so far we are concerned, we shall neither be sympathetic nor apathetic in the matter of such bodily concept of life. So my sense he's saying we are empathic. We are empathetic.
Yes.
We are empathetic. Sympathy means we get absorbed in the drama, in illusion. Apathy is like we're callous, we don't care. So we're empathetic with the pain, and we cultivate knowledge, realize that we're not the body, while being empathetic with the pain.
Right. I'm wondering how that looks. Not sympathetic. Well, I mean, you say empathic, yeah. Not sympathetic, not apathetic.
Yeah, it's a beautiful use of language. We shall neither be sympathetic nor apathetic. So the way I see Prabhupada saying we ought to be empathetic. Which he's making the statement. Paradukaduki. Feeling one's other's pain as one's own, but not in a sentimental way, on the foundation of knowledge, and on the foundation of how to relieve ourselves and others, how to liberate ourselves and others from material suffering altogether.
In the end of that sentence, he says, in the matter of material condition of life?
In the matter of such bodily concept of life.
Yes. So he's specifically saying in relation to material conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll read that again. Of course, it is quite natural to become sympathetic when one's body is put into such horrible condition. But if you are firmly convinced that this body is separate from the soul, then we may not be distracted. That is not possible, of course, in the preliminary stage, but when we shall be in a transcendental position, not to be disturbed by every such a horrible scene, then our position is secure. The suffering of the man and the sympathy of the other man both are concerned on the body. But this we have to understand by knowledge. Then such horrible condition of body won't be disturbing to us. That is the position of liberation.
Oh. Prabhupada gives all the nuances about maybe not possible in the beginning, but that's the ultimate, and it gives a progression. There's a progression there, obviously. Gradual advancement. I mean, it doesn't have to be gradual, but yeah.
Yes. Okay, so March 1968, Prabhupada writes to Satsvarup, The evening twilight first appeared as a beautiful girl to attract the demons, but later on turned to be evening twilight. There is no reality in the material beauty. What you think is real, that is also unreal, because everything material transforms into matter at the ultimate stage. It is the spirit soul who is beautiful and not the matter. June 1st, 1968, Prabhupada letter to Upendra. The example of Naradaji that when he realized Krishna in his previous life, that life and the next life, there is no difference. The example is given sometimes in the coconut skin when it is dried up. The fruit within the covering is hard, and if the coconut is shaken, it is found that the coconut fruit is moving within. Because it has dried up and broken away from the inner walls of the coconut skin. So it has nothing to do with the outer skin, even though it appears that it is within that skin. Similarly, when one is purely in Krishna consciousness, it may appear that he is within the material existence, but actually he has nothing to do with it. He is dried up like the coconut fruit, and that process of drying up is forgetting all sense gratification and executing Krishna consciousness full time. So when one is purely in Krishna consciousness, his present life and future life are identical. Yes.
Your present life and future life are.
Yes. Well, the way Laura asked, what's Prabhupada mean? Your present life and future life are identical. Right. So, okay, just like I'm talking to you from here, so I could get up and sit on that chair and talk to you from there. I'm doing the same thing. I'm talking to Laura. So similarly, if in this life we realize our identity as Jiva Rasrupavai Krishna and Nichidas, spirits all servant of Krishna, and all we do while in this body is serve Krishna, then when this body dies, okay, we go to another body, we go to another place, maybe a different body of a different color, maybe a spiritual body, but we go to a different place, but just like I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to chant Hare Krishna. I'm going to serve God with love and devotion. So for the realized soul like Narada Muni, this body dies. So, okay, wherever the soul goes, I'm going to keep serving Krishna. Identical. Yes, that's what it means, that a devotee is ageless, is timeless. That the rising and setting of the sun does not diminish the life of the devotee, because the devotee, the devotional soul is just doing what the souls do in eternity. We are living eternity in this body to the extent that we're engaged in Krishna consciousness. And if we're not doing that, then we're touched. Oh, but how will I enjoy if this body dies? And what about my house and my children? What about my bank account? I still have this to accomplish, and how will I enjoy eating and sex and like that? Because if we're touching material enjoyment, that will be crushed by the death of the body. But a devotional spirit soul just keeps doing what the soul is doing in this body. Okay, we'll read one more letter. And this is Shiropod letter to Chittananda, July 12th, 1968. Prabhupada writes, regarding some of your questions, your question was, I understand that we are not this body, mind, and intelligence or ego, but our pure consciousness or pure spirit soul. This consciousness has been polluted by association with matter. By association with Krishna, this consciousness will be purified. This consciousness is all throughout our body, giving us the power to think, will, and feel. But how is the consciousness interrelated with matter? Is consciousness like the mist that hangs around a mountain? How do matter and spirit connect, and how do they work together? I hope you understand my question and what exactly takes place when consciousness becomes purified. So Prabhupada's student asks many questions. So Prabhupada writes, a living entity has constitutionally mind, intelligence, and ego, but they are contaminated in contact with matter. At the present moment, our ego is working under some designation. Somebody is thinking that he is an American or Indian, and another is thinking that he is brahmachari or householder. This sort of ego is material, but when one is firmly convinced that he does not belong to any material designation, but is pure identification of eternal servitorship of Krishna, in Vedic language, it is called Aham Brahmasmi. That means I am spirit soul. Mayavad philosophers, on account of their negligence to serve Krishna, may sometimes come to this understanding of Aham Brahmasmi, but they again fall down to the material platform on account of such negligence. Therefore, this process of chanting is being constantly in Krishna consciousness. There is no such fear of falling down of the devotees. Your statement, quote, by association with Krishna, this consciousness will be purified. That is correct. Consciousness is not related with matter. Just like the air is always pure, but when there is a mixture of dust in the air, it appears to be a cloud. The cloud and the air are different substances. Similarly, consciousness is pure spiritual, but when the consciousness desires to enjoy matter, it becomes cloudy and dusty or contaminated. And then at that time, thinking, feeling, and willing, everything becomes polluted. So Prabhupada's giving a very vivid analogy to show that the soul is always pure. But just like the air itself, is always pure in that, but the air can be mixed with dust. So our air, the soul doesn't really mix with material energy, but it can become contaminated. When the consciousness desires to enjoy matter, it becomes cloudy and dusty. The same example as I have given several times, that the proprietor of a car and the car are different identities. When the proprietor thinks that this car is for his enjoyment, he becomes absorbed in such thought. And as soon as there is some loss or accident to the car, he thinks that he is hurt. This consciousness is false, but one suffers the consequences on account of false identification. Consciousness is not like mist, but when it is materially contaminated, it looks like it. Another example, that water from the sky falling down on the ground looks muddy, but water is not muddy, it is clear. When the water is again filtered and the muddy things are precipitated, the water comes to its original luster, crystal clear. So our Krishna consciousness movement is that we have to clear our consciousness by the transcendental addition of Krishna chemical. Then everything will be nice and clear, and we shall be able to see our identification without any designation. I think your questions are answered up to the last part when you inquired, what exactly takes place when consciousness is becoming purified? Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada, did he say the Krishna chemical?
Yeah, he used that term, just like because he talks about like if water is muddy and cloudy,
Yeah.
there's some chemical that purifies it. So Krishna, so Prabhupada's extending that analogy.
Yeah.
And so our Krishna consciousness movement is that we have to clear our consciousness by the transcendental addition of Krishna chemical.
In the first letter you wrote, I think Prabhupada used the word vitiate at least twice.
Yeah.
The pure consciousness becomes vitiated. One of the dictionary definitions of vitiate is to spoil or impair the quality or efficiency of. So I accept the material identification, and that contaminates, that purifies, that adulterates, spoils that pure consciousness. When they have that Krishna chemical added to reverse that, clear it.
Thanks for that. Yeah, Prabhupada, he likes that word, vitiated, means like polluted, impure, distorted version. Yes. Hare Krishna. Any other comments or questions? Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for your association.
Thank you.
Krishna.
Hare
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 Krishna.
Krishna.